I am so excited to be here in the home of Phoebe Lapine, the author of The Wellness Project. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for having me to my home.
Right, thank you for having me in your beautiful home. So The Wellness Project is really a culmination of a year of your life that you spent kind of trying to take a holistic approach to fixing an illness that you had, but also to find a way to really live with it that wasn't so restrictive. So explain the concept of the Wellness Project, because it's different. When people see the word wellness, sometimes they're like, oh my God, am I gonna be eating kale every day for the rest of my life?
Kind of a polarizing term, which is how I arrived at this project. So I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is an autoimmune disease that affects your thyroid gland. And that was way back when I was 22. And so it was kind of 7 years in the making to arrive at the aha moment that led to this grand year of health that I designed for myself. I found myself incredibly overwhelmed by all of the different things that I was being told in the holistic community, which stood in contrast to just the Western medicine perspective of here's a pill, but also kind of felt prescriptive in its own right, and it didn't really feel like I had room to kind of live a healthy lifestyle and live my life. And so I kind of arrived at this question over and over again, which ended up being the subtitle of the book, which is how can I learn to do right by my body without giving up my life? So I actually took that 30-day idea, but in kind of designing these one change at a time approaches. And so some of them were a little bit extreme, but the idea was that it wasn't going to be cumulative, but I was going to find kind of a new road forward afterwards with a little bit more moderation after kind of having seen the black and white effects of some of these things. And so, of course, food was a big through line for me because I was a private chef,
cookbook author.
Exactly. But also, other things that I kind of, wasn't paying as much attention to: sleep, stress management, hydration. So I kind of did these one change, 1 month at a time. And then by the end of the year, I kind of could say to myself, all right, well, these are the things that are actually worth my time, money, and energy. And these are the things that I'll just, lay by the wayside and say thanks.
Right, and each chapter of the book, at the end of the chapter, you sort of have a list of suggestions, and you say right from the outset, like, take some of them, take all of them, but find what works for you. Was that sort of the biggest piece for you, of sort of testing the theories each month at a time and then sticking with what works for you as an individual? Because one of the things I really loved about this book is that it doesn't say, like, do my exact thing and it will work for you. You're treating each individual as an individual.
Exactly. I mean, my motto is wellness is a journey within, and it's so true, but I think everyone kind of looks for that silver bullet, that, really easy, like, do this and you'll live for the rest of your life without disease and be very skinny. Yeah. But in reality, of course, like, it's not like that. And most physicians, even who do write more prescriptive books, will say, there's bio-individuality and there is no one-size-fits-all situation. To me, it wasn't just about being my healthiest self, but about making sure that the things I added to my life didn't really detract from the other aspects of wellness that are just as important as, what's going on in your blood work.
And one of the things that I think is hard for people getting started on a wellness journey is the surrounding people. You have a story in the book about, meeting your boyfriend's father and his stepmother for the first time, and she's serving you something that you can't eat, and you're like, oh my God, what do I do? I mean, how, for a lot of people who say, how can this fit into my lifestyle and the lifestyle of the people around me? How did you find that? And what is your advice for people saying, like, I want to give something up, but it's hard with sort of the world around me eating cheeseburgers?
Totally. Well, I'd say A, it's a process. And B, I totally understand where that's coming from. Obviously, I wrote about some of those struggles of my own in the book. But, really, kind of not being that girl was
right, like, I don't want to be the, like, vegan, gluten-free, like, I can't eat this, I can't eat that.
Not being that girl was, like, kind of a huge barrier to making any changes around my health. And so, okay, I'll give an example. My first experiment was probably the most extreme. I gave up sugar, alcohol, and caffeine for a month, and that was definitely the most extreme, I will preface it. And it was probably one that really affected my social life. Even the caffeine part affected my social life, going out to coffee, meetings with people and what have you. But I also kind of had to evaluate, like, where my hedonism was justified and where it wasn't.
Yeah.
And, there were definitely times that I found that I didn't actually need the alcohol, or I didn't need the sugar, I didn't need the caffeine. And some of the times where, you know, just having those restrictions like made me feel alienated from the situation. But I think by the end of that, I really did discover like, oh, you know what? My fear of being that girl is really, you know, that's an internal problem that's on me. And if we can just stop worrying so much as women about what everyone else thinks and, you know, being the problem child at the table, I think most of the time you'll be surprised that people respect it a lot more than you maybe do.
Or they don't even notice.
Exactly. So I would say, like, stop worrying about being difficult and then go from there.
And let's talk about a diet that isn't impossible, because I think that's often the line for people, is finding a way to diet without giving everything up. What were some of the things that you found as you were sort of cutting things out, adding things back in? You obviously have a specific autoimmune disease that you have to work around, but how should people approach sort of living a healthier lifestyle with food without giving up everything?
Totally. Well, I think kind of my way of finding this middle ground between health and hedonism, and kind of what I was slowly doing throughout the entire year, was figuring out what my non-negotiables were and where there could be some wiggle room. And I think if you can find that for yourself, like, that will give you so much more freedom to just like feel confident in your decisions, and then to also know in certain situations like where you can be more flexible. So in terms of diet, I think that a really big way to, you know, a really big first experiment for that is to do an elimination diet, which is essentially trying to figure out what your food triggers are. So it's taking out a lot of the big allergens, and then after a certain amount of time, usually 21 days or so, you can start individually adding them back in. And that'll give you a good idea specifically of what your body's reacting to, because we eat all of these foods in combination all the time. So it's really hard to know like what the specific trigger is. And then also, it's like when you are eating, you know, an ingredient all the time, you may be having like a low grade reaction that you don't necessarily notice.
Well, the book is The Wellness Project. If you are thinking about starting a journey of your own, but you are kind of nervous about where to start, it's a great book to sort of begin a new journey on. So Phoebe, thank you so much for having me in your beautiful home.
Thanks for coming.